My name is Simone Callahan, though for the past decade, most people in my world have known me simply as SJ, founder of Aurea Ventures, a luxury real estate and lifestyle conglomerate that's quietly shaped the skylines of Miami, Austin, and Dubai. But to the Callahan family, I was the poor one, the dreamer, the one who, as Aunt Meredith liked to say over Christmas dinner, never really found her footing. That label stuck to me like a stain I couldn't scrub off, no matter how many walls I tore down or penthouses I built up. The invitation arrived in a crisp cream envelope, sealed with the signature crimson wax crest of the Callahan family. The annual Callahan reunion. This year, it was set to take place at the new Stanton Grand Hotel in Charleston, a place my family called top-tier elegance. The irony of it almost made me laugh. That particular hotel, that glimmering icon of Southern luxury, was one of my company's latest acquisitions. But of course they didn't know that. The Callahans never really paid attention to what I did, only to what they assumed I lacked. I opened the invitation slowly, curious to see what kind of performance they were planning this year. But before I could finish reading, my phone buzzed, with a message from my cousin Blake. He was the ringleader of our family's private clique, the unofficial mouthpiece for the group, and the gatekeeper of Callahan image. His text, brief and unapologetic, stopped me cold. "Hey Simone, just a heads up. After some discussion, the planning committee thought it might be best if you sat this one out this year. It's a little upscale. Hope you understand. No hard feelings. No hard feelings. Of course. They never said it directly, but it was there in every syllable. I wasn't Callahan enough. Not wealthy enough. Not glossy enough. Not performative enough to belong in their curated photo ops and champagne-filled banter. It wasn't the first time I'd been excluded, but something about this moment hit different. Maybe it was because I'd just signed the closing papers, on the very hotel they chose to host their glittery little get-together. Or maybe it was because after all these years of building in silence, I was finally done hiding. I stared out from the balcony of my Manhattan apartment, high above the pulse of the city, the lights flickering below like 1,000 little reminders of everything I had built from scratch. No handouts, no family backing. Just grit, vision, and relentless hours behind doors no one thought I could open. My fingers tightened around the edge of the envelope. This wasn't just about a reunion. It was about rewriting the narrative they'd were forced on me since I was 18 and told them I didn't want to work in banking like everyone else in the family. I wanted to build. Back then, I remember my father pulling me aside after dinner. "You don't just walk away from the Callahan legacy, Simone. You inherit it, you protect it, but I didn't want their legacy. I wanted my own. I started small. A single apartment renovation in Miami's design district. I painted walls myself, staged the unit, hosted my own open houses. I lived off granola bars and the occasional favor from friends. But within 2 years, I'd flipped 6 properties, turned one into a boutique co-working and lifestyle club, and used the profits to acquire my first piece of commercial real estate. The world called it luck. I called it obsession. Now, at 37, I own 16 luxury properties, 4 international resorts, and a venture fund that supports underfunded women-led startups. But to the Callahans, I was still the black sheep with the thrift store wardrobe and no real job. The funny part is, they never asked. They never looked past the image they built in their heads years ago, an image I let them keep. Until now. My assistant, Milo, knocked gently at the office door. "The Charleston team is ready for your final instructions," he said, tablet in hand. "Perfect," I replied. "Let's elevate the event. Add the gold leaf menu, replace the floral arrangements with peonies and phalaenopsis orchids, and tell the concierge to extend the presidential suite for 3 nights. I want the family to feel thoroughly impressed." Milo raised an eyebrow. "You're still hosting them?" I smiled without warmth. "Oh, I'm not just hosting them. I'm about to give them the best night of their lives, and they won't even know they're standing in my legacy until it's too late, he grinned. You want security briefed? No need. Their silence will be punishment enough. That night, as I finalized the press embargo for Oria's newest partnership, a $500 million venture with a hospitality giant in Asia, I couldn't help but feel the shift coming. The moment where everything changes. Where all the quiet, wins, all the small sacrifices finally take up space. I wasn't attending the reunion to reclaim my seat at their table. I was about to show them I built the table, set it, and now I could choose who got a seat. 2 days before the Callahan reunion, a storm rolled across the Charleston coastline, thunder cracking in the distance like some celestial warning shot. I stood on the rooftop deck of the Stanton Grand Hotel, overlooking the glassy marina where super yachts bobbed in rhythm with the wind. Below me, final preparations were underway, floral arrangements being wheeled in, marble floors buffed to perfection, and the custom lighting crew wiring the final reveal that would soon shatter every illusion my family ever held about me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was nervous, but because I couldn't stop thinking about what it had taken to get here. 15 years ago, I was living in a windowless studio in Queens, taking freelance drafting jobs and selling real estate renderings online just to make rent. My mom, God rest her, used to send me care packages stuffed with dried mangoes and handwritten notes, always ending in, "They'll see one day, baby. Just keep building." She died before she got to see what I built, before she saw me go from the broke girl in a borrowed suit to the CEO of one of the most disruptive real estate firms in the country. But my father had lived long enough to choose ignorance. He knew. He had to. You don't just ignore a daughter making headlines for closing a $240 million deal in Manhattan without deliberate effort. Yet at every holiday dinner, every birthday call, he'd make comments like, "Still doing that apartment stuff?" And as if I were flipping Craigslist rentals instead of designing the future of urban luxury. It wasn't just him. Uncle Grant once told me I was too emotional to lead a real company. My cousin Blake, the same one who just told me to sit out of the reunion, had laughed when I told him I was opening a co-working space in Miami back in 2012. WeWork's already cornered that market, he said. Ironically, when WeWork imploded years later, Blake lost his entire Sure Thing investment portfolio. I could have helped. I didn't. Now they were arriving at a hotel they thought was just another 5-star jewel, just another bragging. Right for the Callahan name. What they didn't know was that the Stanton Grand wasn't just another trophy in my company's collection. It was my personal design. Every inch. From the hand-carved oak reception desk to the ocean view rooftop, where I was now standing, glass of Barolo in hand, watching them approach in a convoy of chauffeured Bentleys and vintage Rolls. They were early. Of course they were. Callahans were always early when it came to appearances. I watched Serena step out first, tall and thin and poised in a Chanel ensemble that looked like it had been yanked straight from a fall runway. Her husband trailed behind, adjusting his cufflinks while their nanny wrestled with designer diaper bags and a toddler whose name I couldn't remember. Behind them came Uncle Grant and Aunt Elise, arms stiff, sunglasses still on despite the overcast sky. And then Blake. My blood boiled a little at the sight of him. He was wearing a navy double-breasted suit, and that smirk I knew all too well, the one he wore when he thought he'd won. Milo's voice crackled in my earpiece. "They're checking in." "Do it," I said quietly. 5 minutes later, the concierge approached the Callahan check-in group with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry," he began, professionally rehearsed. "It appears there's been a small miscommunication. The event host has requested all family members be escorted to the secondary reception suite until the main ballroom is ready." "Excuse me?" Serena's voice was pure venom. "We were told this was a private VIP arrival." "It still is," he assured her. "The owner wanted to ensure your experience was personally curated. You'll be escorted shortly." They followed begrudgingly, heels clicking across the floor. They had no idea the secondary reception suite had been outfitted specifically for this moment. Screens hidden behind mirrored glass, cameras cued, lighting dialed to cinematic perfection. They wouldn't just see what I built. They were about to walk through it. Inside the suite, the Callahans were met with a sleek circular room glowing in soft amber light. No one else was present, no staff, no greeters. Just a low hum and the hush of luxury so pure it commanded silence. Then it began. The walls flickered to life. Projection-mapped panels revealed a digital timeline, 15 years of my life unfolding around them. Each screen became a window into the past. My first property in Miami, the makeshift office I rented in a WeWork knockoff, the rooftop of a Brooklyn brownstone. I turned into an eco-garden. Voiceovers played snippets of interviews, investment pitches, press interviews, all layered over the soundtrack of soft jazz, my mother's favorite. Then came the turning point. Footage from 3 years ago, my biggest moment. The day I closed the Stanton deal, standing beside a former White House advisor and two of the most powerful real estate tycoons in the country. I'd worn a $90 dress from a local designer that day, but my name, Simone Callahan, flashed across headlines that wrapped the entire industry in silence. Blake stood frozen, jaw tight. Serena blinked rapidly. My father sat down, and then the screens shifted once more. Final slide. Welcome to the Stanton Grand, owned and designed by Simone Callahan. Enjoy your stay. The door behind them opened, and there I stood, in a tailored midnight suit with gold accents, hair pulled back, the city lights casting a halo around my frame. I stepped inside and let the silence stretch, and finally I spoke. I hope the welcome was satisfactory. You're not just staying at my hotel this weekend. You're walking through every step of the journey you never cared to ask about. No one said a word. If you've ever been written off by people who should have cheered you on, if you've ever stayed silent just long enough to let the truth roar when it finally had the floor, then you know what that moment felt like. And if you want to see what happens when a woman stops asking for permission to be great, subscribe now, because this story isn't over. It's only halfway through. As the soft glow of the LED screens faded and the room fell into stunned silence, I stood at the center like a storm's calm eye. I could see it all on their faces, the way their identities shattered in real time. The slow collapse of years spent believing they were better, smarter, more successful. In the stillness, you could hear every unspoken apology swelling behind tight lips, each one born too late to matter. But this wasn't a moment for closure. Not yet. Not when the truth had just barely begun to breathe. Blake was the first to speak. "This is insane," he muttered, his voice brittle with disbelief. You own this place?" "No, Blake," I said, walking slowly toward him. "I built this place, from concrete to concept, from the permits to the paint. I didn't just buy in. I dreamed it, drafted it, and drove every nail with purpose." His mouth opened and closed like a man drowning in dry air. I didn't let him speak again. "You remember the Thanksgiving you called me a burnout?" I asked, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. "Said I was too artistic to survive the business world, that no man would take me seriously. With my little renderings?" I was joking. "No, you weren't," I snapped. "You were speaking your truth. And I took that truth and carved it into every damn marble tile in this lobby." Serena stepped forward, her heels echoing against the stone floors like a warning shot. "Simone, you can't honestly expect us to apologize for not knowing. You never told anyone." I turned to her slowly. "I never told anyone because no one ever asked." The words hung heavy between us. They weren't just about a resort. They were about a lifetime of being erased. You assumed I failed because I didn't speak your language, because I didn't show up in pearls and hedge fund titles and empty brand name praise. You mistook my silence for surrender. I looked at my father then, the man who once told me that a Callahan's only worth was measured in quarterly profits and Ivy League titles. And you taught me to believe I wasn't enough unless I played by your rules. He didn't meet my eyes. Of course not. He never did. So I stopped playing, I said, the fire rising in my chest. I built a game of my own. The weight of my words settled into the silence. Somewhere in the back, Camille, the only one, who ever truly called just to hear how I was, stood with tears in her eyes. I hadn't meant to look at her, but when I did, I softened. I remembered the nights she called from college to talk about dreams, not dividends. The way she used to send me hotel ideas sketched on napkins. The quiet way she believed even when I didn't. Then, suddenly, my father spoke. Quietly. Why now? It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was the voice of a man whose empire had been eclipsed by a daughter he thought he'd left behind. Because you banned me, I said, stepping closer. Because after all these years, after every hint and headline and project, you still looked at me and saw a charity case. A stray. Not a builder. Not a visionary. Just your disappointing daughter who couldn't make it. You don't understand the pressure this family carries. No, I cut him off, voice rising. You don't understand what it's like to be dismissed by the people who raised you. To show up to every holiday with news you had to shrink, to fit their comfort, to build legacy in silence because speaking too loudly would embarrass them. And then it came, the twist I'd kept secret even from Marcus. I reached into my blazer and pulled out a black leather folder. This, I said, laying it on the table, is the signed acquisition contract for the Callahan Tower project downtown. You remember that, Dad? The family's prized $300 million development? His eyes darted to the folder like it had teeth. I didn't just outbuild you. I outbid you. The room collectively inhaled. Camille let out a soft gasp. The Callahan Tower, I continued, was bleeding money. The board knew it. Investors were ready to pull out. You had one shot at refinancing. But someone came in quietly and made a better offer. I paused. Blake Architecture Group didn't just build the Stanton. We now own the project that was supposed to be your legacy. My father stared, the color draining from his face as if he finally saw it, not the daughter he dismissed, but the hurricane he created. I tried to tell you, I said more gently now, but you never heard me over your own ego. For the first time in my life, the man who raised me, so certain, so dominant, so sure of his own superiority, looked shaken. And that's when I knew this wasn't just my win. This was the collapse of an old empire, replaced by something better, something earned. I'll give it back, I added, voice cool and measured. The project, the name, the tower. I'll let it carry your family crest, if and only if you attend the rededication ceremony, and you announce, publicly, that your daughter saved it. His mouth quivered, his pride warred with reality. But pride never kept a building from falling. You'd really humiliate me like that? He asked. No, I said softly. You did that to yourself. I'm just showing you the foundation you tried to ignore. The silence returned. But it wasn't awkward. It was truth. Heavy. Unmistakable. Real. The silence that lingered after I laid the Callahan Tower contract on the table was not the kind of silence that begged for explanation. It was the kind that stung, heavy with realization. My father's mouth twitched, the weight of it all slowly settling into his spine. His hands, once used to signing deals that moved markets, now shook just slightly as they hovered above the folder that bore the name of the project he once declared would outlive him. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But pity is the privilege of those who've never had to earn every inch of respect in a room built to exclude them. And I had earned mine, twice over. As my father struggled to swallow the truth, Serena suddenly erupted. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade dipped in denial. "You're punishing us. That's what this is," she snapped. "You're just parading your success around like a trophy because you never fit in." I turned to face her slowly, steady, without blinking. "No, Serena. I'm not punishing you. I'm finally letting you see me. And if that feels like punishment, maybe it's because you're realizing who you really are without your throne of judgment to stand on." She flinched. It was subtle, but it was there. The sharp inhale of someone who's spent her life building a kingdom out of someone else's silence. I kept going. "Do you know what it's like to sit across the table from your own blood while they pretend your dreams are a liability? To build something extraordinary and still be handed the kids' menu at family dinner?" I could feel the air shift. My uncles stopped sipping their scotch. My cousins, who'd spent years forwarding job postings to me like charity, stood a little straighter, unsure of what to do with their hands. And somewhere near the back, I saw Camille, my little sister, the one bright thread in this twisted family weave, watching me with something raw in her eyes. Pride. And maybe sorrow, too. "You all speak legacy like it's something handed down, in monogrammed cufflinks and generational wealth," I said, my voice rising now, each word slicing cleaner than the last. "But real legacy is built, brick by brick, with blistered hands, in rooms where no one believes in you. It's built at 2 a.m. while you're sweeping a lobby floor because you can't afford staff yet but refuse to cut corners." I walked to the center of the ballroom. My heels echoed against the marble, a drumbeat beneath the reckoning. "You say I'm showing off, that I kept secrets. But ask yourselves this. If I had told you I was building this, would any of you have believed me? Would you have offered help, or just another version of, maybe it's time to be realistic, Simone?" Someone behind Serena coughed, a hollow sound of guilt. I didn't look to see who. Then, my father stepped forward again. This time slower, more deliberate. "Simone," he said, his voice a pitch lower than I remembered. "You've made your point." I shook my head, lips pressed into a controlled smile. "I'm not done." He hesitated, and for once he waited. "I gave you all the benefit of the doubt," I said. "I assumed that your coldness was just misunderstanding, that if I worked hard enough, got successful enough, you'd finally let me in. But I see now, I was never meant to be welcomed. I was meant to know my place." The words burned going out, because they were true. "But here's the twist," I added. "I do know my place. It's not at your table anymore. It's at the head of my own." The ballroom doors opened suddenly. Marcus stepped in, his tablet in one hand and a wireless mic in the other. He nodded at me, and I took the mic slowly, turning to the entire room now. "Good evening, everyone," I began, the weight of years and miles finally finding a voice that carried. "Thank you for attending the 42nd Hawthorne family reunion. No, I wasn't on the guest list. I know some of you think I shouldn't be standing here. But what you're standing on, what you're drinking from, what you're taking selfies with, is mine." Gasps. "This isn't just a hotel. It's not just a resort. It's not even just a company. This is my story, my scars, my sacrifice. And every thread you chose to overlook is stitched into the success you're surrounded by tonight." Marcus tapped his screen. Behind me, the screens changed again, this time to a looping video montage. Footage of me in that first motel, mopping the floor in a t-shirt and ripped jeans. Of the prototype sketches laid out on my tiny studio floor. Of construction sites, ribbon cuttings, interviews, tech team meetings, late-night coffee-fueled planning, sessions. All of it. My rise, from the ground up. Gasps turned to silence. Then to something else. Respect. Earned the hard way. "I was never the family failure," I said softly now, letting the words land gently. I was just the first one, willing to build something without your permission. And if you've ever stood on the edge of being excluded, if you've ever been the one they dismissed at dinner tables, the one they thought wouldn't make it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next, it's no longer about proving them wrong. It's about rewriting the rules. Simone Callahan wasn't just a name they forgot. She was a name they'd never be able to forget again. The ballroom didn't breathe. For a long, echoing moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the LED screens as they cycled through footage of everything I had built, every overlooked milestone, every dismissed achievement. It was all there, framed against chandeliers that once seemed too far above my reach to matter. My story played in their silence like a requiem for all the versions of me they refused to see. I stood there, grounded and still, watching. And then, the questions started. First, it was Aunt Diana, her voice tight with disbelief, like the words had to force their way through a throat that wasn't ready to admit what her eyes now understood. You mean to tell us, all this time, you've been building this? While we thought you were barely getting by? She didn't even try to hide the edge of shame curling around her tone. No, Aunt Diana, I said, calm as moonlight. You didn't think I was barely getting by. You decided it. You never asked. I saw her lips part to respond, but nothing came. She looked away. Behind her, Uncle Ron shifted uncomfortably, fiddling with the cuff of his suit sleeve. He'd once told my father I was a soft investment. That I had heart, but no head for business. I remembered that line because it came the same day I signed the lease on my third property. He hadn't looked me in the eye since. From across the room, my cousin Trevor cleared his throat. Simone, it's unbelievable, he said. Honestly, I don't even know what to say. I'm not asking you to say anything, I replied, not unkindly. But maybe now, you'll stop saying things like, I got lucky, every time a woman makes it without a man signing her paycheck. That one stung. It should have, because I had heard it too many times. Even when I hit my first million. Even when I launched my AI-integrated design software. Even when I outbid corporate giants for the rights to 5 historic properties across 3 continents. Luck? No, this wasn't luck. This was war. A war I'd fought quietly, behind their backs, beneath their ridicule, and beyond their imagination. As the murmurs continued, I saw her, Camille. She didn't approach right away, just stood there, hands clutched in front of her, eyes glossy. She'd always been the only one who tried, who called, who sent little notes of encouragement when no one else remembered my birthday. I gave her a small nod. She stepped forward and hugged me, tightly, without words. I'm sorry, she whispered. They didn't deserve to be surprised like this. But I'm so proud of you. Her voice cracked on that last word, and it nearly undid me. But I held it together. I had to. Because this moment wasn't for me. Not anymore. This was about a shift, a permanent one. Then the unexpected happened. My father stepped forward. Now, let me be clear. This was not a man known for public humility. Gordon Callahan was the kind of man who'd once written off his own brother for wearing a borrowed suit to a fundraiser. For him, image was truth. And my image had never measured up. Until now. Simone, he said, voice low, heavy. I don't know what to say. I looked at him. Looked at the man who once told me my ambitions would be the end of me, who refused to walk me down the aisle when I married my first husband because I chose a small outdoor wedding over a country club ceremony. He didn't look proud. He looked broken. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in his presence. You don't have to say anything, I told him. I think we're past that. He nodded slowly, as if swallowing something jagged. His gaze wandered across the ballroom, taking in the grandeur, the photos, the empire that grew from his rejection. Then he turned to the bar and poured himself a drink. Scotch, neat. That was his answer. Not words. Just a gesture of silent surrender, but the night wasn't done testing me. Just as I returned to my table, Marcus approached. His face was unreadable, his tablet in one hand. I knew that look. Something had shifted again. "What is it?" I asked. "There's a press van outside," he said, lowering his voice. "Looks like someone tipped off a media outlet. They want to comment on tonight's reveal." I didn't even flinch. Of course they came. Of course someone leaked it. I didn't have to guess who. I glanced at Serena. She was on her phone, her fingers moving fast, eyes darting like she was calculating damage control in real time. Good. Let her panic. I'd lived in her version of the world for long enough. Let her try mine for a change. Let them in, I told Marcus. Let the world see what they missed. He raised an eyebrow, then smiled faintly. Already done. Within 15 minutes, reporters were at the door, credentials in hand. I walked out to greet them myself. Flashbulbs popped. Questions were shouted. "Simone, what's your message to your family tonight? Is it true you were banned from attending? Why hide your identity for so long?" I raised my hand, silencing the flurry. The crowd leaned in. "My only message," I said, "is this. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. We're not here to play your game, we're here to build the board." Then I turned, walked back into my own ballroom, and closed the doors behind me. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, that your dreams were too far-fetched, that you'd never measure up to the family standard, subscribe now. Because what comes next is proof that legacy isn't inherited. It's earned. And sometimes, it's carved out of the very rejection meant to break you. Simone Callahan wasn't just the name they once ignored. Now, it was the name they'd never escape. The air outside the ballroom had cooled, but inside, the temperature kept rising. Reporters buzzed around the entrance. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. And just beyond the chaos, my family lingered, caught somewhere between shame and disbelief. They moved in slow, uncertain steps, as if one wrong motion might confirm the nightmare they now realized had been of their own making. I stood apart, letting the moment stretch, watching everything unfold from the mezzanine balcony above. It should have felt satisfying. The vindication, the power, the full-circle grandeur of it all. But what hit me hardest in that moment wasn't pride. It was grief. Grief for the time I'd spent seeking approval that was never coming. For the years I'd buried brilliance under politeness. For the girl I used to be before I learned that family could love you and still never believe in you. Marcus approached quietly, holding a glass of sparkling water. "They want to speak with you again," he said. "Some of them." "Not press, your family." I turned to him. "Who?" "Your sister and your mother. Your father hasn't said much." I almost smiled. Of course he hadn't. Gordon Callahan didn't do apologies, just silence and exits. I took the glass, swallowed hard, and nodded. "Bring them upstairs." In the private lounge, I waited. Camille came in first, her eyes red-rimmed, her designer clutch crumpled in her hands like a napkin. She looked smaller than usual, like the weight of pretending had finally cracked her spine. Then came my mother. Vivian Callahan was elegance incarnate. Still stunning, still sharp, still dressed in the kind of understated couture that whispered, "Old money." But tonight, even her grace couldn't mask the shock etched across her face. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. "Simone," she began, her voice soft, halting. "I think I owe you—" "No," I interrupted gently. "You owe yourself," she blinked. "What do you mean?" "You spent years telling me to take the safer route, to not embarrass the family, to think smaller, stay quieter. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting a version of yourself that couldn't handle a daughter who wanted more. Silence fell. Camille wiped her cheek. You know, I added, setting my glass down, when I was 17, you told me I had a gift. You watched me redesign that tiny guest room in our summer house and you said, you could make a career out of this. But when I applied to art school, you ripped up the application. My mother sat down slowly, stunned. I was scared. I thought you'd end up struggling, alone. I did, I said, but not because of my work, because of your silence. She said nothing. She couldn't. Camille reached across the table and took my hand. We were wrong, she whispered. All of us. I nodded, holding back the welling behind my eyes. I didn't need you to believe in my dreams. I needed you to believe in me. Just then, the door opened. My father entered. It was the first time I'd seen Gordon look aged, not older. Aged. As if the truth had added a decade overnight. He didn't speak right away, just walked to the window, stared out at the skyline, the city that now bore my name in contracts, not just conversations. You planned all of this? He asked finally, voice low. The venue, the reveal, the media. I tilted my head. I planned the truth. What you're feeling now, that's just the consequence. He turned to me slowly, like the words had taken something out of him. You could have said something. Years ago. I did, I said. You just didn't listen. He looked at Camille, then at my mother. I failed you all, he muttered. But I failed her most. There it was. Not an apology. But a crack in the marble. I walked to the sideboard and pulled out a folder, the same one I'd shown investors 3 years ago, the one that outlined my multi-phase expansion plan. I placed it on the table in front of him. You want to make it right? I asked. He nodded slowly. Read this, I said, and then decide if you want to invest. My mother blinked in surprise. You'd let him be part of it now? I gave a soft laugh. I didn't say I'd accept the offer. I said he could apply. For the first time, my father smiled, wry, weary, but real. Fair enough. As they stood to leave, I felt it. Something shift. Not forgiveness, but clarity. When the door closed behind them, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Rooms cleared, he said. Press is packing up. Staff is on post-event protocol. What now? I looked around the private lounge, my sanctuary for so long. And now, the stage where truth had taken the spotlight. Now, I said. Now we go global. He raised a brow. I just got off the phone with the Paris office, I added. The Louvre is interested in a design collaboration, and Tokyo wants to license our modular luxury suites for their Olympic bid. His jaw dropped. I smiled. I think it's time the world knew what a Callahan really builds. He laughed, shaking his head. You're terrifying. I stood, walked, to the window, and stared out over the glowing skyline. Only to the ones who tried to break me. That night, the city pulsed with electricity. The skyline sparkled like it had been lit for me alone. But even as the glass walls of my penthouse glowed in soft, warm light, my thoughts weren't on the celebration winding down below. They were with the ghosts that had walked the ballroom floor, the ones that bore my name, my blood, my past. I stood barefoot in my suite, heels discarded, the hem of my dress brushing the cold marble as I looked out at the bay. The weight of the evening hadn't hit me all at once. It had seeped in slow, like water through stone. I had delivered the show. I had pulled off the twist. But what remained now wasn't victory. It was something murkier, more dangerous. Reflection. I hadn't spoken to anyone in hours, not Marcus, not Camille, not the investors who had been secretly seated among the guests tonight, quietly watching how I handled power under pressure. Everyone had texted, Everyone wanted something. And yet, all I could think about was a single moment. 10 years ago, when I'd cried in a supply closet after my first pitch meeting failed, thinking maybe my father had been right, that I was dreaming too big, that I didn't belong in rooms like this. Now I owned the rooms. But the feeling, that hunger to be seen, really seen, it still lingered in the corners of my chest. My phone buzzed. It was Camille. A photo. The family. All of them. In the hotel's rooftop garden. Sitting around a fire pit I had designed myself, each of their faces shadowed by flickering flame and fresh discomfort. They looked smaller, realer, like people, not gods. And beside the image, a text. They're talking. Really talking. Dad cried. Sat down on the edge of my bed, the fabric cool beneath me. I hadn't cried. Not once. Not when Serena's champagne glass shattered on marble. Not when my mother's hand trembled as she flipped through the hotel's ownership paperwork. Not even when my father whispered, "I failed you." I hadn't cried because I couldn't. I had trained myself, year after year, to hold the line. To stay composed. Because if I ever let myself break, even a little, the weight of everything might drown me. But now, alone with the silence, the tears came. Not loud, not wild, just quiet, heavy, like rain on a window no one else can hear. And it was in that stillness that something unexpected happened. My phone rang again, an unknown number. I answered without thinking. Simone? A voice said. Male, gentle, nervous. Yes? It's Adrian. My breath caught. Adrian Wexler, my college boyfriend, my almost. The man I thought I'd marry before everything fell apart. Before ambition cracked our foundation and time tore us in opposite directions. Adrian. I saw the coverage, he said. The hotel, your speech, everything. I stood walking slowly toward the window, heart pounding. You look incredible, he said softly. More than that. You look whole. I didn't know what to say. You always said they'd come around, he added, even when they laughed. Even when you cried. And you said I'd become cold trying to prove them wrong, I whispered. There was a pause. You didn't, he said. You just became unstoppable. I swallowed hard. I'm in San Francisco, he added. I never left. I just thought, maybe now isn't too late. It was too much. The reunion, the power shift, the tears. And now this. A ghost from another life, returning just as I'd thought I'd sealed the final chapter. I can't promise. Anything, I said honestly. I'm not asking you to, he replied. Just dinner, just time. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I ended the call, heart racing. Then walked to the small drawer beside my bed, the one no one ever opened. Inside was an old photo, me and Adrian, college-aged, all freckles and foolishness, sitting on the hood of his Jeep, grinning like the world was ours for the taking. I placed it gently on the nightstand. And then, just as I turned back to the EI window, a final message flashed across my phone screen from Marcus, CEO of the Year. Finalist. International press wants confirmation. Shall I accept? I stared at the screen. That title. That headline. The culmination of every no, every door slammed in my face. Every time my last name felt like a burden instead of a badge. Yes, I typed back. But tell them something else too. Tell them I'm just getting started. Because here's the truth no one teaches you. The real victory isn't in the reveal. It's in the rebuilding. It's what you do after the curtain drops. After the applause fades. It's who you become once everyone finally sees you, and you no longer need them to. And if you've ever stood in the shadows, wondering if your light would ever matter, let this be your sign. Don't burn for them. Blaze for yourself. The morning after the reunion, the Celestia was quiet in a way it hadn't been in months. No PR teams rushing to rearrange furniture, no designers tweaking floral arrangements, no distant laughter echoing through the halls. Just stillness. Honest, unpolished, sobering. I stood alone in the rooftop garden, barefoot on the cool stone path, the Pacific air soft against my face. The sky was beginning to blush with the first signs of sunrise, and in the distance, the silhouette of the Golden Gate Bridge rested against a canvas of gold and blue. Last night had changed everything, and yet changed nothing at all. The reunion hadn't ended with applause. There were no group photos, no toasts, no sudden transformations, just long stares, quiet realizations, the uncomfortable process of ego being stripped down to humility. And beneath all of that, the start of something resembling honesty, the truth was never meant to hurt them. It was meant to free me. 15 years of silence, of watching them build a version of me they could dismiss, ignore, laugh at. The poor cousin, the failure, the one who chose hospitality because she couldn't make it in finance. I had accepted that role. Played it so well they forgot I was acting. But last night the script flipped. Not because I demanded respect, because I had earned it. Quietly, thoroughly, irrefutably. And in the end, it wasn't the luxury or the grand reveal that stunned them. It was the patience, the long game. The discipline to hold my truth until the moment they were ready to hear it. My father had left me a note, folded neatly on the nightstand in his suite. No apology, just a single line. You were always right. I just didn't know how to handle it. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't closure, but it was real. And that was enough. My phone buzzed. Marcus flight to Tokyo confirmed. Paris team prepped. Media embargo lifted. Are you ready? Yes, I typed back. I was, because this empire was never built to prove something to my family. It was built for the ones who watched quietly, like I once did. The underestimated. The dismissed. The dreamers forced to carry their ambition in silence because someone louder told them it wasn't realistic. And if that's you, if you've ever sat through a dinner where your success was invisible, where your ambition was misunderstood, where your silence was mistaken for weakness, I need you to hear this. You don't owe anyone your pace. You don't have to shout to be seen. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all, just patience, just preparation, just becoming. Undeniable. I didn't rise through revenge. I rose through resilience. Through scrubbing bathrooms at midnight because I needed to know how it felt. Through rejections. Through stolen ideas. Through family telling me to aim lower, play safer, marry richer. Through the years when all I had was a vision and the stubborn belief that my time would come. And when it did, I didn't need to scream it from a mountaintop. I just opened the doors and let them walk into the very thing they told me I'd never have. My legacy. Not built from old money, not inherited, not gifted. Created. Brick by brick, decision by decision, and maybe the greatest moment of all wasn't when Serena dropped her champagne or when the LED screen lit up with my name. It was when I looked at my reflection afterward and felt no need to explain. No bitterness, no vengeance, just peace. The kind that comes from becoming everything they said you couldn't be. And not needing them to say congratulations to feel it. So here's what I hope you take from this story. You will be doubted. You will be overlooked. You will be misunderstood, mocked, maybe even banned from rooms you deserve to be in. Let them. While they measure you by their limited standards, go build something that rewrites them entirely. Work in silence if you must, but work with soul. Lead with integrity. Create with courage. Let the world keep guessing until the day you no longer need to explain. And on that day, walk into the room you own. Smile. Not because you beat them, but because you became someone who no longer needs them to see you in order to shine. That is the real legacy. And if this story stirred something in you, if you saw a reflection of your own journey in Simone's silence and rise, then let this be more than a story. Let it be your signal. You're not too late, you're not too quiet, you're just getting started. So take a breath, stand tall, and when the time comes, make them walk into your legacy. And if you're still reading, still feeling this in your chest, then you know what to do. Subscribe to this channel, not just to support what's next, but because your story matters too. And I promise, there's more coming. Stories of strength, of justice, of quiet power turned undeniable presence. So stay with us because sometimes the ones they silence are the ones who end up writing history.